My name is Jenny Easley, and I work for CASA Southwest Idaho. It's also known as the 3rd District Guardian Ad Litem program. I've been there for 3.5 years. I'm an advocate coordinator, which means that I supervise and mentor volunteer guardian ad litem who take on cases through the child protection courts. And do you want an explanation of what guardian ad litem is?
Yeah, please.
Okay,
yeah,
sure.
Really, this is a conversation,
Okay.
and really, it's to help continue the conversation for people who maybe don't understand anything about the foster care system other than just very basic.
Yeah, so when a child comes into child protection for neglect, abuse, they are assigned a guardian ad litem through the child protection court. The judge assigns a volunteer guardian ad litem. Well, in our case, the judge.
Let me have you pull that mic just a little closer
Okay.
to your face there.
Okay.
Cool, thank you.
So when a child comes into child protection due to neglect or abuse or abandonment, they are assigned a guardian ad litem. And that is a person who joins the case. Sorry, the elevator speech on this is complicated because
There's a lot of moving parts in general, right?
Yes. So for our program in the 3rd District, especially in Kenyon County where I primarily work, the judge assigns our program to the case, and then we assign a volunteer guardian ad litem who we have trained and background checked and mentor. And we get them assigned to a case, and they go and meet the child or the children's sibling group. They become an advocate for that child through the duration of the child protection case. The benefit of having a guardian ad litem is that it is one person who's assigned to the child all the way through. So while a child might have multiple caseworkers or multiple foster care placements, they have one person, their guardian ad litem, that's assigned from the beginning and hopefully to the end. Most cases, the guardian ad litem is there to the end. So in my role with our program, I do sometimes work cases that don't have guardian ad litem volunteers, because we need more volunteers. We have more cases than we have volunteers. So I work those cases, but whenever possible, we get the cases assigned to a volunteer. And the primary job I do is to help the volunteer navigate the system on behalf of the child. So I work behind the scenes with the volunteer, helping them understand how to work with the Department of Health and Welfare, how to work with the court system, how to recommend services for the child. And that volunteer is in the family's homes. They're
Gotcha.
going and visiting the kids.
Gotcha.
And creating that relationship with the kids.
Wow. So you mentioned that there's a shortage of volunteers right now. Is that like what is that kind of a constant problem, or is it due to kind of the growth we're seeing in the Valley, combination of two? Like what's kind of causing that shortage?
So we have grown. When I first joined CASA Southwest Idaho 3.5 years ago, we had maybe 40 or 50 volunteers. We have grown substantially, and we're at over 100 volunteers now.
Wow.
It's not so much that we have a shortage of volunteers, it's that we have a lot of cases.
Got it.
So we have a lot of people willing to step up, but the number of cases outpace the number of volunteers. And we are continuing to recruit volunteers. It's kind of a long volunteer commitment.
Sure.
Most of our cases can be anywhere from 18 months to 3 years, sometimes longer in some cases.
Wow.
If things don't go great.
Yeah.
So
Well, so let's talk about that, about what it's like to become a volunteer then. So you're talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm interested, I've heard there's a need. What does the process look like from I'm interested but I don't know anything about this
Sure.
to what it's like for my first case? How many cases do I get? What is this whole
Sure.
what does this look like?
So the first step would be to connect you to our volunteer manager, who would set up an interview with you. You go through an interview process just to make sure it's a good fit for you, to make sure you're a good fit for us, because it is a selection process. We have to make sure that we get good, dedicated people in. And we want to make sure that we're a good fit for them, because it is a commitment, and it's a hard volunteer role, and so you go through the interview process. Both sides decide we want to continue. Then you go through a federal background check and fingerprinting, and we wait for that to happen. While that's happening, you go through our 30 hours of in-classroom training. Those are held one time a week, and we do them in the daytime and in the evening to try to accommodate different schedules. Some of our volunteers are retired, some of them are college students. We have 21-year-olds, we have almost 80-year-old. So
Wow.
the age range is wide. So we have people who work, people who are retired, people who are in college. So we try to make sure that the training can accommodate everybody. Once you go through that training and you pass the background check, then you're assigned to one of us, advocate coordinators. You're paired with an advocate coordinator who is then going to mentor you through the rest of the process. Once I get a volunteer assigned to me, I go through a couple of cases options with them, sibling groups, different ages of kids, see what's the best fit, and the volunteer chooses a case. And then I help them with the next steps, which is getting connected to the caseworker who's assigned to the case from the Department of Health and Welfare. I get them connected to their attorney, because they're all represented in court. They have an attorney assigned to them, so I get them connected to their attorney. And then I teach them how to contact the family where the child's placed, and they arrange that first child visit. And then I go with the volunteer on their first child visit to meet the family, the foster family and the child. And then they just start on their path of following the case. And we get a court order assigned to us. So the volunteer has a court order to obtain information about the parents and about the children, to really get a good picture of what's going on with the family. The goal of all cases in the beginning is reunification with parents, and so we want to see that happens in the safest way possible, if that's possible. And so the volunteer, it acts as an independent investigator for the case, looking into the background of the parents, looking into the background of the child, getting records that are relevant to the case so that we can get a good picture of what's going on. And our volunteers get to help create the case plan, which is the path towards reunification for the family, if that ends up possible. And if it's not possible, then the volunteer helps guide to what is the right permanent option for the child, whether that's adoption or guardianship or aging out of foster care.
Gotcha. Wow. Okay. So in a perfect world right now, obviously in a perfect world, I guess we wouldn't need
Right.
need this, but in a perfect world for CASA of Southwest Idaho, how many more volunteers do you think would kind of fill the caseload?
So for 3rd District, which is where we're out of, and I can't speak to the numbers for the other districts.
And where is 3rd District, just for people
3rd District is Canyon County. I work primarily in Canyon County, but it encompasses Washington, Gem, Adams, oh, I'm so bad at this because I only cover Canyon County. We have staff that covers the other counties, so it's it's the six counties that are involved in the District 3.
Got it.
So, so for us, for our outer county cases that aren't Canyon County, we take all of the cases that the judges will assign to us. In Canyon County, because the number of cases outpace the number of volunteers we have available, we don't take children over the age of 12 unless they're part of a sibling group that has children who are under the age of 12.
Wow.
And that's because over the age of 12 and up, kids get their own attorneys who advocate for what the kids want. Our goal is to be on all of the cases, including the teenagers, because we represent the best interest of the child in court. So when we're going in and making recommendations, we are representing the best interest of the child. Children who have an attorney, those attorneys are representing what they want, which sometimes what they want and what's in their best interest aren't the same thing.
Yeah, I think anyone who has or has been around kids knows that's true, right?
Right. So, so our goal is to be able to take all of those cases.
Yeah.
Right now, we're only taking the over 12 cases on a case-by-case basis if there is increased vulnerability where the child maybe has developmental delays and their ability to utilize their attorney is impaired in some way compared to other kids their age, or if there's extreme circumstances on the case. Sometimes caseworkers from the Department of Health and Welfare or the attorneys or the judge will say, no, this kid needs a guardian ad litem, and then we do our best to get them matched to somebody. But we take all under 12s. So right now I'm supervising 32 volunteers on 68 cases, I think is my number right now.
Whoa.
And I'm one of 5 advocate coordinators in our office. So yeah, and a couple of them are only part-time, but that kind of tells you the sheer number.
That's a big number.
Yeah, it is. And I'm currently covering, I think, 11 cases right now that I don't have volunteers on.
Wow.
So yeah.
There definitely is a need.
There definitely is a need, and it's such a fulfilling thing to be a part of. And you know, it's frustrating because you're butting up against a system that is broken in some ways. And
and really filled with a lot of bureaucracy, right? It's not intended to be a quick process.
No.
Going through the court system.
No, so you have the bureaucracy of the court system, you have the bureaucracy of the Department of Health and Welfare, you have the frustration of service shortages, trying to get kids who've been abused, sexual abuse, or physical abuse, trying to get them counseling. Sometimes the wait lists are outrageous. So there's a lot of frustration involved in this volunteering, but there's so much reward in it too. And when you see the little wins and sometimes the big wins, it's an incredibly rewarding. And we can't help but think when we see things, even as frustrating as some of the things are we see, imagining what it would have been like if they hadn't had a guardian ad litem who was checking in with their school or checking in to make sure that they got into counseling, that didn't slip through the cracks, or to help guide them into the right kind of placement. It's scary to think about what those cases would look like without a guardian ad litem on them.
Wow. Yeah, yikes. How many cases does one volunteer take on at a time?
So it depends on the person. CASA national standards recommends 2 cases, 1 to 2 cases. We can do more than 2 cases with an exception, and that means that we just go over with the volunteer how their time management looks. Can they really handle more than 2 cases? What does their self-care look like? Because it is a lot of exposure to secondary trauma. So we want to make sure that they are taking care of themselves to be able to expose themselves to that. That said, we've got some warrior volunteers who are taking on 4 and 5 cases because they have deemed that they have time and they've shown that they're able to handle that many. But for some people, 1 case is what they want because they want to give it their full attention, and they're working full time or whatever. So it's really a personal choice, and it partly depends on the kinds of cases that you have, because some of them can be pretty complex. You can have a 1 baby case who is born positive to methamphetamine, or you can have a 5 sibling case where there's sexual abuse and physical abuse, or neglect, underfeeding, all different kinds of things. So it depends on the kind of case you take too.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. What does, for people who are interested in helping out with this, becoming a volunteer, what does the time commitment look like? I know you've said that there's people who work full time, there's students, but like just in a general week, obviously that's gonna I would imagine kind of depend on the case itself, right? I'm sure some of them are very hands-on, very intensive. But if you were to take kind of a mean average of the cases you work on, what would a normal week look like for me?
Sure. So we tell our volunteers that they can expect an average of 5 to 8 hours a month.
Oh, a month. Oh, okay.
A month.
Wow.
And yes, because you need to do at least 1 child visit per month, and so that's probably an hour or 2 hours. Depends on what you're doing. Some of our volunteers create good relationships with the foster parents, and so they might be having pizza together in the foster home, or they might meet up somewhere to go out. But the rest of the time is spent checking in with the school, and with the teachers, checking in with the counselors, checking in with the Department of Health and Welfare. Sometimes it's only a couple hours, but if it's a month where you have a court report due, because our volunteers do write the court reports.
Oh, okay.
If there's a month where you have a court report due, it's probably a little bit more time, but
sure.
That's why we average it out to 5 to 8 hours a month.
Okay.
Some of our volunteers would laugh in my face saying 5 to 8 hours, because like you said, some of the cases can get quite complex, and if you've got a sibling group of 4 and there's 3 different placements involved, then those volunteers are going to 3 different homes to visit the children on their cases.
Yeah, okay.
Which can happen. Unfortunately, siblings can get split up.
Oh man, gosh, yeah, I'm sure there's, kind of both ends, right? They're the ones that are
right, but sometimes we'll have a volunteer that say, I don't know if I'm doing enough because I'm not doing the 5 to 8 hours. But like I said, that can be a really simple case where a baby was born positive to meth, parents are incarcerated, and the child's in a great foster home with very little need. And so those cases can maybe be a couple hours a month.
Gotcha. Yeah, man, it's tough to really kind of, I'm sure, kind of weigh those things.
Which is why we do a lot of conversation with our volunteers to make that good match, because some volunteers are uncomfortable working with teenagers, and so they prefer baby cases, or some people are more comfortable working with teenagers and want older kids so that they can interact with them and play games with them when they go to visit or do crafts.
Gotcha.
And so we really try hard to match volunteer interest to the type of case.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see if I kind of missed anything. What's kind of one thing that you'd want somebody to know? I'm on the fence now. All right, we've been having a good talk. It sounds really interesting. What's one thing you wish people knew about either CASA itself or about becoming a CASA?
I think one thing that is super important for volunteers who come in is that sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that a case is going to go to reunification. When you first take a case and you open up the documents that explain why the child came into care and what the situation was for the family, you are seeing that family at their very worst moment, and you are seeing the very worst thing about those parents as your introduction to them.
Sure.
More than 60% of our cases, I think, in Canyon County end in reunification. So volunteers have to be very open-minded that parents are capable of change and that they can still be the best option for their own children with the right services and right change in place. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And so there's a whole path for that too. But I think the number one thing for volunteers is just to be open that people can change, and that your introduction to this family isn't the whole story. And just to be able to hold two thoughts in your head at the same time. These
Right.
bad things happen, and there is this future possible. All that being said, obviously if only a little over 60% of our cases are ending in reunification, then a good number are not.
Right.
And those are ending in adoption or guardianship, or the child aging out of foster care depending on their age. So just some flexibility with your thinking and an ability to keep biases in check.
Wow. Yeah. Now, is there any question that what didn't I ask?
There is so much about volunteering and working with these families that there's probably hours and hours worth of conversation that we could have about it. But I think one other thing that I'll just mention that does surprise people, and I think that even foster parents can struggle with this a little bit, when a case goes to end in adoption, depending on the age of the kids, if they're old enough to understand what's happening, being adopted out of foster care, while it is a thing to celebrate for the child, it's also a period of grieving, because it's still giving up, or in their minds choosing to love a different family than the one that they were born with. And so for the child, it's a very mixed bag.
That's a really complex emotion to
it really
deal
is.
with as an adult. I can't imagine it, as a kid.
Yes, and sometimes I think foster parents who are adopting don't understand that as much as they should. Many of them do understand that,
Yeah.
but some of them don't, and it is a time where we can see spikes in behaviors with kids, and just increased grieving and complex feelings. So
Yeah.
so that's just a tidbit about it. Otherwise, I think just I would wrap it up by saying that volunteering as a guardian ad litem, you will see some really dark stuff, but you will also see this amazing resilience that kids have, especially when they know that somebody is there with them, somebody's in their corner. I've been assigned to cases where in the beginning the kid has had to move multiple placements. As you can imagine, kids who come into foster care and have this trauma have behaviors that go with it. Those behaviors make it difficult for them to learn in school, and it makes it difficult for them to be in foster placements, and they can be moved multiple times And so when a kid sees that the same guardian ad litem keeps showing up at each place that they get sent, or shows up at their school, you see this realization dawn on them that you're their person, and that they can trust you, and that you're going to keep showing up. And that is so rewarding, even if we're dealing with the rest of the system that is, for adults, is super frustrating.
Yeah, man, no kidding. Well, I think the last thing we should probably bring up, because by the time this comes out, we'll be not far away. I guess it's next week at this point. Is the CASA banquet event, right? The Circle of Hope banquet event coming up, and that's a big fundraiser, right? One of the big ones for helping CASA, right?
Yes. It's at the Nampa Civic Center on the 23rd, and tickets are still available right now. You can go to CASA Southwest Idaho.org, and it is.
We'll also put that link right underneath in the video description and everything as well.
Yeah, and it is going to be a great fundraiser. I understand that a family who has navigated the child protection system is going to be speakers. It's a family that has adopted children out of foster care, and so the adoptive father, and the 11-year-old that was adopted out of foster care are going to be there and speaking for us. So we're very excited to hear from them.
It's good. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty powerful event, and something definitely worth for folks that can't go. I know that that, correct me if I'm wrong, that's also going to be live streamed. Is that correct?
There is, and I am not involved in planning that event, and so I don't know all of the details, but I do know that there's going to be an auction, and there is going to be an online way for people to participate in the auction. That's right. Okay. Yes.
We will put all those details in the description here. Buying something at the silent auction would be a great way to donate. And then I also know the Circle of Hope is kind of the monthly donors circle. Yes. And now that's a great way for people who maybe don't have the time, or maybe just maybe being a volunteer just isn't kind of for me in this situation.
Yes.
That's a way people can get involved.
Yes, for sure. There's so many ways to help kids in foster care, being foster parents, being guardian ad litem, and for some people neither of those are good fit. The donations help us, and again, because that's not my role, because I'm doing something completely different in our program. I don't remember the numbers, but I know that it's $1,200, I think, covers the cost of advocating for a child for 1 year.
Right.
And so it is so helpful. Those monthly sustaining donors are really a bedrock for us, because as you can imagine, small nonprofit, there's constant grant writing, constant funding seeking. We are mandated to exist by the state, but we are not fully funded by the state. So
gotta love that.
Yeah. Yes. So yes, the monthly sustaining donors make a huge difference for us.
Absolutely. That too, we will have a link for those that can. I know from previous conversations I've had with Becca and some of the other folks from CASA as well, that's a really big thing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This was great. I think the more that we can talk about ways that people can get involved in, that there is a need. From just how many stories we've been running, how much work we've been doing on our end to try and help get the word out there. I think one of the common things we keep seeing, or we keep hearing, is that people just aren't necessarily aware that there is a problem, right? Or if they are, it's like, well, it's just a broken junk system.
Yes. And part of the reason that they're not aware is because we do so much to protect the kids and their confidentiality, and their stories are hard, and And if you were a victim of a sexual abuse or physical abuse by your parents, you wouldn't want that story out there all over the place.
Right.
And so the system and we as Guardian Ad Litem do so much to protect their stories that sometimes it can make it seem invisible to other people who don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well,